You feel the vibration, don't you? You know what's happening, right? We're healing our culture. We're healing all of us as little boys and little girls that were taught division. We're healing at a cellular level today. And we are clearing any identification or limitation on humanity or anything living. We are having ourselves this level of a healing. And so what's going to happen after today, if you're interested, thank you for asking, is that you're going to have more energy than you have had in your entire life. Yes? Can you stand with that? You can stand with that. Stand with that energy. Be energized in the presence. We are having our healing today. Absolutely. Woo, put those clocks up. Here we go. So a man's lived on a farm all his life. He's never been to a big city. And he goes to New York in one of the major high-rises there on Park Ave, and he comes into a building and he sees an elevator for the first time. Well, he's just kind of shocked by it, and he sees this haggard, older woman walking in the elevator. He's just kind of looking like, what is this? And then in a moment it came back down, and it had a really young, beautiful woman coming out of it. And he said, son, go and get your mom. It's our nature to reach for possibilities. It's our nature to reach for something that hasn't received our name yet. It's our nature to immerse in what we don't know yet about ourselves. I look out over this amazing community. Happy Valentine's, all my beloveds. And I look out over this community, and I'm just brought to tears every week because I see that half of this community is 40 or under. Are you with me? If you're under 40, you want to stand? Stand. Look at you. 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 Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling when so many New Thought communities throughout the country are going, well, we don't know what to do about bringing in no young people. It's like, well, if you would be young, you would bring yourself in some young people. You know what I'm talking about? And leadership, if you're young, young people love you. If you're young as a parent, your children will always want to be with you. If you are young in heart, you will always track the heart that matters to you. That is the ancient story that we call life. I was in Paris a number of years ago, and I was with friends. We were traveling together. There were 4 of us, and we came upon an elevator. And, you know, they said there was a size limitation. We could have read that a little better, but we all get on there, and some were heavier than others. I'll leave it at that because they might be watching. But anyway, so we go so far up, and we get stuck, you know. And at first when it happened, we're like, okay, divine order. Duh. But then after you're there for a while, it just started getting smaller and smaller. And you look around, and I'm going, God, these are the people I'm stuck in the elevator with. Oh my gosh. And you have this reality check, right? Because you want to be aware the people you're around, are they the people you would really want to be stuck in an elevator with? It's a real important kind of reality check, yes? And, you know, life is like that, isn't it? Life is like an elevator. You're going up, you're going up and you're going down. You're going up and you're going down. And it's how you weave between those places of your possibility that makes such a difference in your life. Einstein said one of the greatest statements of all times: if you want to shift the current problem or challenge that you have, you must use thoughts that you haven't used before. Because if you use the same thoughts, you're going to create the same situation even better than you did before, perhaps quicker, but over and over again, you see. I'm convinced that that's the reason that some people will not let go of their addictive personalities, because they project onto the letting go that they're going to have struggle, because that's the past self, not the future self. I'm convinced that people hesitate in relationships to stay because they keep repairing, treating something that it is broken. And when you're living in a relationship, treating it that it is broken, you continue to see what's broken. Instead of putting it all behind you and say, come Monday, we're going to forget all of it. I'm going to see you new, you're going to see me new. We're going to act like we've never met before, and that's the place we're going to start from. Does that make sense? So you use that different kind of thought process because it takes you then to a place that is your evolution, rather than that same old paradigm and rather than that same old energy. I was fortunate a few weeks ago. I went to Sarasota. I went to the Ringling Museum and the property. It's fascinating there, right? But I was walking through the Circus Museum, and it's magnanimous. I mean, it has a railroad car in it and showing you how they lived when they were, with the railroads traveling. It has big trailers where they carried lions and seals and all this stuff. And as we're walking around, first thing I noticed is there were no children. And that was like, check. And then I noticed how quiet it was. We were actually like whispering to each other. We were like whispering. And I thought, here we are, we're whispering. And we're at the circus. We're acting like we're at a morgue or something. I mean, there's something like really wrong with this, It's so quiet. And so I walked by one of the attendants. Well, he asked me, and he said, well, what do you think of this? And I said, I think it's wonderful, but I said, it's missing because it doesn't externally reflect that it's a circus. A circus used to be one of the most vibrant, one of the most dynamic places on earth. And I said, it's just way too quiet here. Turn the music on. And he looks at me and he goes, well, we do have music in the building next door. And I stood up real straight and I went, well, but that doesn't have anything to do with this building. Like, take a new class, right? Then somebody else said the same thing. Oh, yeah, I said the same thing again. I answered, I said, it'd be so nice if you would make it like a circus and have kid activities, and then children would want to come and see this display, And it's, there's some playing in that other building over there. Well, in that other building over there, just real lucky there. Anyhow, the cashier said, people tell us that all the time, but they won't do it. Breathe it in. I'm like, Ringling, you need to send some download to these people, okay? But that's just an example, right? It's an example of how people will do things the way they've always done them just because, and that's what somebody said. I've always loved that story of why our trains are the size, the gauge of 4 foot, 8.5 inches. Don't you think that's kind of interesting? You might think I need more things to do, but I find it pretty fascinating that they found, 4 feet, 8.5 inches. Like, what is that? Well, why do we have trains that way? Well, because most of our trains were developed by expatriates in England, and that's the size that England had. And then you wonder, well, why did they have it like that? Well, they had it that way because in past time, when they developed the various trains going through, they went with the way the wagon wheels in Roman era went, and they just went along with the lines that were already created, 4 feet, 8.5 inches. Fascinating, right? Well, the reason is because the war chariots were that wide, and the reason they were that wide is because of the war horses. That's how wide their rear ends were. So, when you see trains and stuff like that, now you know. Aren't you glad you came today? But it just shows you how we do things the way we've always done them. You want to clear yourself of those conversations. Not refer to, well, we did it. I love that one. Well, we tried that years ago. Oh, please, bury that and pick up something new, right? Trying it years ago has nothing to do with trying it now. Let's say that together. Trying it years ago has nothing to do with trying it now, because you're not like you were then. I'm not like I was then, right? So you just never know. So when we think about up and down, we think about life, one of the things that's important for us to understand is the value of our feeling nature. In spirituality, we get into this kumbaya kind of vibe. It's like everything is absolutely perfectly divine and magical in my life. And that's beautiful. But there's also other sides of our feeling nature that sometimes you may not have that kind of day. It's not the owning of the feeling, it's the denial of the feeling that brings distress in our bodies. And I brought in a medical expert to prove that today. In the Science of Mind magazine, this was so important to me that I wanted to read it out loud to you, if that's okay. This is Christian Northrup. As an example of progressive medicine, she cites a powerful case study by Dr. Mario Martinez that focused on Tibetan lamas, the monks, taking refuge in India. As a clinical neuropsychologist, Martinez was intrigued by the high rates of diabetes in this group. Other Tibetan refugees didn't share the same health issues, so Martinez ruled out change of diet. Upon thorough analysis, Martinez concluded that it was the Lama's mental focus on forgiveness that caused distress in their bodies. How could that be? They forgave while repressing the anger for the injustices placed on their people. When anger is bypassed for loving kindness, as in the Buddhist tradition, the body still has to deal with the intense emotion in some way, so it releases endorphins. Overrun by endorphins, the body's ability to process and use glucose is compromised. The result, increase in diabetes, according to this study. I would also say of all red energies that it's a possibility. So when we think about this, do we get to forgiveness? Yes. But do we do it prematurely without experiencing the true energy in our bodies? No. Why? Because it affects us physically in every way, correct? And so it's a very powerful awareness. When you feel stuck in the elevator of your life, do a check-in. What part of yourself are you denying about yourself? When I was so privileged to meet up with a woman that chose me as her student, as my shaman teacher, she said to me, you've got to understand that spirituality is owning all of you. Because until you own all of you, you're never going to be able to own all of your life. And so I went on this journey, and I was reading In Search of the Beloved by Jean Houston. And as I went into this meditation, I had this memory of when I was 30 years old, and it wasn't long ago, so you stay with me, 30 years old. And so all of a sudden I am overwhelmed with grief because the beloved that I thought was my lifelong beloved had died when I was 30 years old. And I wanted to be such a good metaphysician that I kept like wanting to force myself to get over it. Quit grieving. He's in a better place. Oh, she's still an angel. Oh, all that stuff, right? But I would just go, how do I get past this grief? So what did I do? I would attract relationships that I would deny, that I never truly let in. Why? Because I never let the pain of love in. Until you let the pain of love in, you don't get to really love the joy and let it come in, you see? And so it's like I let myself be immersed with this energy, like bring it on. Bring it on. And I sat with that and I wrote about it and I got gooey and messy and I just said, oh, I'm so in it. And a few months later, my lifelong beloved showed up. BB. Because there was the space for living in the truth. We deal with the aspects of ourselves. It's the greatest possibility that we have to bring in these other elements of who we are. But what we deny, people will continue to deny about us, and we wind up being in some level stuck because it's energy. Find joy and sitting with all the places, even the fun, even the ones that don't feel so fun. Be real about them. Don't analyze. Don't use logic. Don't sound like a Reader's Digest. Just deal with it. You see, you deal with it. And then you become clear to be an attraction magnet. You become clear to bring it on, okay? Because nobody is going to do for us what we will not do for ourselves, right? A story of a woman, Ellen Grace O'Brien. She was on my radio show this past week. And she said that she had walked through so much of this stuff as in practicing Buddhism, and she wanted to create an enlightenment center in San Jose. And she said somebody had donated $10,000 to the cause for them to purchase land. Well, in that area, $10,000 will put a few bushes of landscaping and maybe buy you a half of a parking space, right? And she said, but they wanted to be in this adventure and they kept looking, kept exploring. And they came around this property and they just knew it was theirs. And they dealt with their feelings of anxiety and energy and whatever. And she said, but they just kept saying, this property is ours. They got a call. Someone that had never been involved with their center, either then or even now, said, I would like to contribute to your purchasing this land. I agree, it belongs to you. Wrote a check for $2 million with no motive, no criteria, just simply a grace gift. Possibilities of life. You see, ask. James 1:5 says, ask God. Ask. Where do you want to be? Ask. What do you feel? Bring it in. Call it in. Grow into the name of it. For it's the space for you to have. Name it. Put your name on it. And it will come. Maybe in a different package, but it will be there. Martin Luther King didn't think about, I'm sure, how many miles the march was going to be. He just knew he had to march. You understand that? Rosa Parks just said, this day, I'm not going to let you take my seat. This day, right? Don't let anybody take your seat. Originality is what's called forth right here and right now. Thank you for being here.